so we won't lose. Okay, very good. All right, so I'm Jim O'Brien. I'm the Zoom host today, and we'll welcome you to our third interview in our Amherst 73 Speaks series. David Brom will be interviewing our classmate Jay Nash. With that, David, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm going to mute the audience, and we will talk to you all at the end.
Great. Thanks very much, Jim. And thank you all for tuning in. And thanks especially to Jay for being willing to be interviewed this evening.
David, before I mute, I need to warn you and Dave, you and Jay both need to unmute after I do this.
Okay. Thanks, Jim. And thank you all for tuning in this evening. And thanks especially to Jay for agreeing to be one of the interview subjects of this series. So Jay, many of you may remember Jay as a member of the Glee Club. I knew him from North. He was on 4th North. I was on 3rd North freshman year. And I knew him slightly during college. Occasionally ran into his name when I was covering global health at the Washington Post. And I saw him about 10 or 12 years ago on a home visit. He had come in from the Democratic Republic of Congo, where he was living. And it was in that visit that I learned about some of his work, and especially his work starting what is known in the global health biz as an NGO, a non-governmental organization. We would know it as a kind of charitable nonprofit organization, which he started to help paraplegic children in the Congo. But there's an awful lot that preceded that pretty interesting story. So we're going to start at the beginning. Jay is speaking from outside of Tampa, Florida, where he now lives after moving back to the United States in November. So Jay, say a few words about where you grew up and your years before Amherst.
Well, I grew up in Situate, Massachusetts, my first 6 years or so. Then my dad, who worked for AT&T, was transferred to New Jersey, to New York, and we moved to New Jersey. Went through junior high school in New Jersey, and then my dad was transferred to Cincinnati, Ohio, which is where I went to high school. So I got a good feel for different parts of the East.
Right. Did your mother work outside the home?
My mother worked outside the home as a social worker, and she was a big influence on my life. She took me to the poorer sides of town when she went there during her work. She took me to Black neighborhoods when she went there. She had me participate in a civil rights march. She taught me about poverty, racism, things like this. And she basically was trying to instill some kind of social conscience in me, I think. I wouldn't say that it sprouted for quite a while. It sprouted much when I got much older, but the seed definitely came from her.
Interesting. Do you have brothers and sisters?
I have one sister. She's younger.
So how did you get to Amherst?
I got to Amherst because I was looking for a small, good quality liberal arts college, and I visited it between my junior and senior high school years. I visited, and I liked what I saw. And then, thirdly, two guys from the class that was in front of mine in high school went to Amherst and said positive things about it after they got there. So that more or less made up my mind for me, which I was very pleased with.
So, say a few things about your college career, and in particular, the music and the Glee Club. And if you want to say a little something about the Glee Club tour, that I think it's not an exaggeration to say perhaps changed your life.
Yes, it did. Music, I was in Zumbais and in the Amherst College Glee Club. So we used to do concerts, and that was always a big part of my off-class efforts at Amherst. I was pleased to learn quite a few years ago, 30 years after the fact, that some of my arrangements were still being used and sung in the Zumbais. I had never thought that they were that good, but the Zumbais put it down as something they held on to. But Amherst, the big event was the Glee Club tour, which took us to 5 countries in Africa and 4 countries in the Middle East. I was an English major, and I was planning to be an English teacher. I hadn't spent more than 4 days in Africa when it occurred to me that it might be much cooler, much more useful to be a teacher in Africa, where there was so much need, than to be one in the United States, where teachers were tripping all over each other. So when I came back to Amherst after the tour, I plunged into African studies. I took 2 courses in African history. I took a course with the renowned Nigerian writer Chinua Achebe in African literature. I took Swahili, or it was a class at Amherst that was Swahili, and I dove back into French. My focus was going to be on being becoming a teacher in Africa, and I thought that these courses would help, and I stayed on the fringes of the English department but made it through. At the end of my undergraduate thesis was written on Elechi Amadi, a Nigerian writer that was suggested to me by Professor Achebe. And when I finished that, I looked at possibilities to joining Peace Corps, and eventually signed up to go to Peace Corps to Congo, and to a small town or large town in the eastern edge of Congo, which is called Bukavu, and it borders with Rwanda. Bukavu was a perfect assignment for me because both French and Swahili are used there. Go ahead.
I understand that you went to Africa literally within about a month of graduating. So you really jumped in with both feet. What was it like going to what was then Zaire, speaking mostly French, I guess, and having responsibilities, having a teaching job over there?
We got along well with the Congolese in the training program. the teaching in a foreign language, teaching in French, like the seventh graders that I taught music to, that was an effort. But it was a Jesuit school and run by Jesuits, and they were a good class. They were the highest, the cream of the crop, basically, in Congo. I didn't have much trouble getting used to living in the town because I made friends right away.
Did you have, did you participate in any musical groups, or did you continue to cultivate your interest in music?
No, not really. I took my 5-string banjo with me, but I didn't play it very much because once it was out of its culture, once it's out of an area where it's played, where people appreciate banjo music, I found that it loses relevance very quickly.
So how many years were you with the Peace Corps?
With the Peace Corps, I was 4 years altogether, 2 years as a teacher, and then 2 years as a volunteer leader, representative for Peace Corps for Eastern Congo. So I drove up and down the eastern edge of Congo, visiting volunteers and placing new volunteers. And
did you learn any other languages during those 3 years?
I learned 3 actually. Well, there was French that I had to get a lot better to teach in it. Swahili, I knew from a little bit from college, but I couldn't get people to speak to me in Swahili. They would speak in French because it would be easier for them. But I went to Tanzania during the summer break and planted myself in a Tanzanian village for 2 months to bring my Swahili up to speed, and that worked. So that when I was back in Bukavu, people accepted to speak to me in Swahili. And the third language that I started to learn was Lingala, which was the language that the music is written. The Congolese music is all over the Congo and in many parts of Africa. And so I had students translate the words for me from Lingala to English, and I basically started picking up Lingala that way.
Wow. Was it coming clear to you at this point that you had a facility for learning languages, or was this something that you'd known all along?
No, and I don't even know to what degree I have a facility to learning languages. I have to work at them. They don't just come. But I have an interest in them, and I enjoy using them, and I enjoy meddling with the structure of the languages.
So after you left the Peace Corps, what did you do?
After I left the Peace Corps, I went to Western Congo to get to make my Lingala a bit better, and also to be close to the music. I got a job with an American construction company and worked as a transportation chief there. And meanwhile, I was perfecting my Lingala.
And what language were you operating in that job?
I was in Lingala. And by the second year, I started living with a family that came from southern Congo. And they spoke a language that was not known in Kinshasa. It was called Rurund. And they spoke it among themselves. It was an ethnic language. But I got very, very interested in trying to find out how it worked. So I started asking questions like, how do you go to the store? He goes to the store, she goes to the store, she doesn't go to the store, we don't go to the store, we will go to the store, and just all kinds of variations like that, writing them down until I could find the patterns. I never got good at speaking at it, but I got a pretty good grasp of the grammar. the one thing that was driving me crazy was the tone system in the language, because the words appeared to be pronounced differently depending on what sentence they were in. And that was nothing I had seen before. Lingala is tonal, but not complex. Ruand was complex in terms of where the tones were to be pronounced. So
when did you decide that you wanted to go to graduate school in linguistics?
about then, just about then, when I had gotten sort of as far as I could go with Ruand at that level, and I definitely needed some coaching or some tools to understanding things to get the rest of it. I had decided that I should go to grad school in linguistics. I went back to University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana and did a master's there. At the end of the master's, I got a Fulbright grant to go back to Congo to study tone in the town where that language was most spoken, and to hopefully write a tone analysis of it. I stayed there for 2.5 years. I wrote down a lot about the grammar of the language, and I worked on the tones and had something of a solution to explaining how they appeared in conversational talk. I brought that all back and started work on my doctoral thesis. It took a few years, but I made it through a 1,700 page thesis, because my thesis advisor had advised that the tonal part be up front, which was what he was interested in, and then that I put in the rest of the grammar in the second part of the book, so that it would be written down somewhere and be accessed by other linguists. So I did. So it was long.
So, was your plan that you would then become a professor of linguistics, or what did you do once you got your doctorate?
That's exactly what I decided I did not want to do. I become a teacher of linguistics. I was anxious to get back into some kind of relevant work in Africa. And I applied to Catholic Relief Services and was accepted. Catholic Relief Services is an NGO, non-governmental organization, which is partly funded by the Catholic Church. They have humanitarian programs and development programs all over the world. So go ahead.
So you, once you joined CRS, where were you sent, and what kind of work were you doing?
I was sent by CRS to Kinshasa town to run a nutrition program, because there were lots of malnourished kids in Kinshasa at the time. So we organized the food distribution.
And how long did you do that for?
I did that for about a year, and then that was transferred from CRS Kinshasa to CRS Angola. And I was transferred to the town of Kubal. It's a large town, almost a city maybe, inland, run by the government, but completely encircled by UNITA rebels.
Yeah, I did, just as a, before you go on, just as an aside, Angola is a gigantic country like the Congo, and much like the Congo, very rich in natural resources, probably richer perhaps than any country in Africa. It's got minerals, it's got oil, it's got a lot of arable land. It has a huge Atlantic coast with fishing. Unfortunately, it also had a 25-year civil war, which was in part a proxy war between the Western democracies and the Soviet Union and Cuba. but in any case, it was the Civil War was still hot when you got there, right?
The Civil War is still hot. They did, about a month after I was there, they reached a peace agreement, and that held for a while, but it eventually broke down.
So describe, some of the, frankly, hairy situations you were in. You told me previously about helping communicating with pilots through a walkie-talkie, speaking Portuguese, which of course was a new language that you learned, directing the landing of C-130s in a war zone. Tell that story.
My very first day in Cubal, I was handed a walkie-talkie and told to get up on the airstrip and to tell the pilots of the C-130s that were coming in which way the wind was blowing so they know which way to land. And then the C-130s would come in and they would taxi up to the part of the landing strip where we were, but they would never shut down their engines. They just turned around and opened the back door, and we ran up inside the plane and disconnected all the pallets and then rolled the pallets down the plane. So the airplane never stopped moving, and it was all the dust and all the wind caused by the propellers was blowing the sand all over the place, and it was hot. And as soon as you got that one done, as soon as you got the plane out, you had to load the sacks of food onto trucks and get that out as soon as possible, so that people who had gathered at the airport wouldn't be tempted to slit the sacks open and cause food to spill out on the ground, which they would then pick up. So you had to protect the sacks. And then there would be another airplane coming, and you do it all again, and that would happen 8 times a day. It was exhausting, and it was a little bit different than anything I'd ever done, and I wondered what I had done to end up in that position. Yeah, that was interesting. That was definitely front lines work for the humanitarian.
Wow.
Line of work.
So how long were you there, and where did you go next?
I was in Cubal for, I think, 2 years. 2 years, it was interesting in that we were able to negotiate with UNITA and drive out into UNITA territories and do food distributions for displaced persons that they had. And IDPs, internal displaced persons. They had some, and we had the food, and we worked through the Catholic priests who had radios to get agreements from Anita to let us come in and see whether they needed it, and then come back and do a distribution. So we made, I would say, 7 or so efforts to get into UNITA territory and distribute food to the people that I had there. It was always a little bit tense because the drivers that I had, the men that I had in my crew, 35 of them were all ex-government soldiers. And so they got very nervous when we drove across the lines into UNITA territory. I got nervous over there every time things started to get quiet. Like, I would wonder if they're not double thinking the invitation, and also wondering if something else happened somewhere in Angola, we would all be sitting ducks. But nothing bad happened. They even invited us to play soccer with them when we came back the next time. And we arranged for the soccer games to always end in a tie, so that everyone could feel good about it. And they threw parties, actually. After the soccer games, they threw parties, and they said that they believed in the peace and that they let their women dance with our government soldier boys.
Sounds a little bit like sort of an African version of the famous Christmas truce in 1914 between the French and the Germans, when supposedly there were soccer games on no man's land. So after Angola, where was your next posting?
After Angola, I was posted in the Dominican Republic.
And why there? That was yet another language you had to learn. You had to learn Spanish for that, right?
That's right. As they were looking around for a country where to post me as a country rep. I had said that I was interested in Haiti, but Haiti wasn't open. And so they said, well, Haiti's not open, but we'll try that. Why don't you try the Dominican Republic? You'll be close to Haiti and you can visit it. And in the meantime, they think this is a good job for you. So I worked in the Dominican Republic. I made several trips into Haiti. But as much as I love the Dominican Republic, which is more or less the Congo of Latin America in terms of music, I kept an eye out on what developments were going on in Congo, because rebels from the eastern part of the country were chasing the dictator Mobutu out of the country, and things were changing. They put in a new government, and the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, announced that they would be reopening an office there. I saw that, and I decided to switch camps and go over there. The job I had there was basically that of a donor. The USAID was the donor to the NGOs like Save the Children, CARE, Catholic Relief Services, IMC, IRC. And I reviewed the proposals and sent them on to Washington with my recommendations, my notes. And they would get funded and come out and work. And I was also supposed to check on the projects and watch how they worked in terms of handling the IDPs. There were lots of IDPs in Congo because of the fighting. So there was lots of work to be done.
So you, in our previous conversation, you mentioned that it was originally a work on development, building bridges and replacing transformers and things like that. But then things kind of fell apart when Congo was invaded. When was that, and how did your job change?
Congo was invaded in August 2nd, 1998. We tried to keep our program going through 1999, but it became more and more irrelevant because the government was more and more involved in trying to fight this war. And our efforts, which were to help the government reach the people in terms of providing good projects, they're sort of irrelevant when you had a big war going on. So we closed that project. There was a project, as you said, that took care of infrastructure that had broken or fallen apart during the Mobutu years. We paid the money, and the government and the civil society and the population worked together to repair the infrastructure. Bridges. In one case, we bought a transformer all the way from South Africa that gave electricity to a whole quartier with 30,000 people in one part of the city.
How dangerous was, how much danger were you in personally and other people working for USAID?
Well, I didn't feel too much in danger until the first incident that happened was I went to work and we were all at work in the office of AID in Lubumbashi when a large mob of women came up. Thousands and thousands of women came up and started to force the gates open to come in because we were the representatives of the United States government, and the population was paranoid and convinced that the United States government had permitted Rwanda to do this, to do the invasion. The US and the UK were behind the Rwanda invasion. And so it got pretty scary with all the number of people. We had 2 policemen inside, and I saw them quickly call their chiefs and say, "Look, chief, we got trouble here. We don't know what to do." So I called the embassy in Kinshasa and said, "What do I do here with all this going on?" And they said, "See if you can separate off a delegation and just talk to the delegation and let the others stay outside." So we did that. We did get a delegation, and these women presented me a long speech to Kofi Annan to give to Kofi Annan about the war and how much they were against the war.
Kofi Annan, at this point, was he the Director General of the United Nations?
Yes.
Right.
But I didn't have a telephone to his office.
So, this mob didn't want to take you out and kill you. They wanted to give you a message to give to the head of the UN.
This mob just wanted to make a statement publicly on television and send this letter to Kofi Annan. There was another mob that was much more dangerous a few weeks later. The whole population was paranoid about foreigners in its midst. They were arresting people for having binoculars in their house, calling them spies, and checking through houses at 5 o'clock in the morning and stuff. I went to the university to visit some students there, and someone decided that I was a spy and blew a whistle and attracted other students and blew whistles, and they said, "You're a spy." Soon the crowd was pretty big, and they were pushing me around, throwing things at me. I got separated from the Land Rover, and I went down on the ground and thought, this is possibly it. I might not get up again. But there's 3 or 4 students that were trying to help me, pulled me back up and pulled me into the girls' dormitory. And the girls' dormitory had 2 doors, and so it was difficult for the crowd to come in. But they were pushing, banging, using battering rams on the doors anyway, and shouting, "You're going to die, you're going to die." And this went on for hours. I thought I reached a point where I thought I was not going to make it out of it. Matter of fact, told the policeman, we had 1 policeman in there, I told the policeman in front of everybody that if they come through those doors, to go ahead and shoot me. I'm not going to go by fire. So it was a terrifying night. And in the morning, early in the morning, hours of the morning, the students that were helping me said, "You've got to make a run for it, because the numbers of students outside have diminished considerably. You can make a run for it." and run towards the military camp down the road. And we'll stay here and hold off the few that are remaining to give you a head start. And so that's what we did. Walked around the back of the girls' dorm with a cloak over my head, sort of like in a movie, and then opened quickly the back door and ran for my life. And I ran to the military station, and the students didn't want to go there, so I was safe.
Wow. And my understanding is that, in fact, that night was perhaps the foundation story for the organization that you then formed, which is what I want to get into next. What sort of epiphany did you have that night that led you to found that organization?
Well, as I was sitting in the shadows in the middle of the night, where I couldn't even smoke a cigarette because we were afraid that somebody would see the cigarette and know where I was. I was upset about two things. The first thing was that I would be buying the farm before my parents did, and that didn't seem fair. And the second thing was that I had 3 disabled kids that I had put on a list and that I was going to help and get treatment for. And I suddenly realized I had no way to get their names out so that somebody else could do it, and they'd probably go untreated. And the lesson that seemed to be learned from this incident seemed to be, if you've got something you want to do, you need to do it right away, because you have no chance of knowing what tomorrow is going to be. And so if you can do it, do it. That was kind of the attitude I came out with of the incident with. I took care of those 3 kids right away, and then I couldn't stop. I did more and more and more.
So tell us about this organization. And in French, the name is Debout et Fier, and it's translated into English as Stand Proud, which is I understand the name of the corporation, the US and UK charity that handles the money. But tell us a little bit about who the clients were, what you did for them.
Basically, the whole thing started way back when I was from first grade in Situate, Massachusetts, when there was a disabled kid in our class, and I asked my mom about him, and she explained polio to me, and said that the effects of the paralysis were permanent. And I remember feeling terrible that this kid would have had this additional burden to carry around. That I thought that it was unjust. But after first grade, I didn't think much more about polio until I came back to the Congo. In the Congo, where you ran into lots of untreated polio cases of people crawling on the ground. So in Lubumbashi, and when I had a Land Rover, and some money, I began picking up disabled kids wherever I saw them, and taking them to the Center for the Disabled in Lubumbashi to get treatment. This didn't work out so well because it took a long time to do the treatment, and the equipment they gave us was not very good quality. About this time, I met someone who had 3 years of experience doing brace crafting, and who had a diploma for it. And I suggested to him that he set up a brace shop in my garage. And he did. We soon realized it had to have a residential component, because you can't just send kids out into the street with braces and crutches without teaching them how to use them. And that takes weeks. So I gave over two spare bedrooms of my large house to serve as a dormitory for kids that were transitioning through the brace house.
And what was the, before a child who couldn't walk, who was paraplegic, got braces, what were their economic and social prospects in the Congo?
The prospects were pretty small. I mean, they were marginalized by the parents had basically decided that these children weren't going to amount to much of anything because of their disability. And they were also ridiculed by classmates. Or they didn't have, most of them didn't go to school, but the few of them that did go to school got ridiculed for their physical condition. Standing them up made a large difference in how they were accepted by other students in school and by the community in general. Go ahead.
What sort of trades would they have done otherwise?
They would have been tailors or cobblers.
And were there wheelchairs, or would they basically drag themselves on the ground or go on little rolling carts, or how would they get around?
There's a contraption which is a three-wheeled tricycle. It's this big tricycle, and they can. A lot of them had those, or not the kids, but a lot of the elder ones had these tricycles. They cost about $300 a piece to make, and so they get around that way. But the point with the bicycles was that the streets were really uneven. They were hard to drive, and then once you got where you were going, there were no ramps. You'd have to get out and walk into wherever you're going on the ground.
So your organization, I understand, would equip them with braces, leg braces, much like what people have seen photographs Franklin Roosevelt wore. What else would you do? Would you pay for surgery? Would you pay for school fees, or how? Talk a little bit about the kind of the range of services that the charity provided.
We did both. We paid school fees for school-age beneficiaries, and we mainstream them into regular public schools. The few disabled kids who'd been to school, as I said, got shunted off and to go to schools to learn to be cobblers and tailors, and didn't get exposed to the full regular curriculum. We wanted our kids to see the full range of activities, and if they wanted to be cobblers and tailors, that was fine, but there were lots of other things. And a lot of them wanted to learn to be doctors and lawyers, or teachers.
How many kids did you, has the organization served?
5,630 something.
Wow. And how much would it cost in dollars to get a kid who previously spent years crawling around on the ground up in braces, with crutches, and with the sufficient physical therapy to navigate on his or her own?
Most cases like that could be done for $1,000, and some a little bit more expensive, complicated cases a little bit more expensive. But that was generally how we tracked it. $1,000 would do it.
And you did this.
David, forgive the interruption. It's about 10 minutes before the hour, so we should probably wrap up the formal questions here in the next 5 minutes and then have some time for Q&A.
I just have a couple more questions. This organization is still working even though you have left the Congo?
Yeah, the organization is still working. It's not as big as it was because the demographics have changed. The mold of polio victims has long passed with the advent of vaccination again in recent years. So we have an eradication of polio. We still have to take care of the old polio beneficiaries who come back for repairs and replacements for their braces. But we concentrate now on cerebral palsy caused by meningitis and then club feet and other birth defects.
And you did this all on the side. You had a full-time job at the same time you created and ran this organization?
Yeah, I had a full-time job the whole time.
Jim, can you share the 2 photographs that I believe Jay sent you before we move into the questions?
I'm going to have to go look for those photographs, so I will get to my email while you guys talk for another minute or two. Let me go find those.
Okay.
When did you send them, Jay?
Just after we talked.
Yesterday.
Yesterday.
Let me take a look. Thank you. Go ahead, continue your discussions.
I think that might have been Monday when we had that.
Yeah, right. Sorry. Exactly.
So just a final question, very high altitude. You have spent your career in obviously austere, dangerous circumstances in countries, at least 2 of them have, riven with civil wars lasting decades. How are you feeling about the future of sub-Saharan Africa or democracy and equality and prosperity in the countries where you worked?
I'm afraid I'm feeling fairly negative. In Congo, the big war between Uganda, Rwanda, and Congo, between those folks ended in 2003, but it left tens of smaller conflicts going, and these tended to be interethnic or fighting over resources. There's mines all over the place which produce gold, coltan, silver. They've got everything, and they're broken up into factions, and I don't really see anyone coming to squash the situation. The UN was supposed to do that in its latter form when they had a Section 7 mandate, but they have not been able to make peace. The fighting has created now 5 million IDPs, and with every week it seems to get worse. It does not get better. Angola seems to be doing all right for the time being, and may do all right. But the Congo, and as you know, the Ethiopia situation, and Mali and places like that, there isn't much hope. Congo really would take a heavy military force from some nation to put down the various militias, and stay for a while. But MONUSCO is not going to do that job, and nobody else is going to do it either.
Okay. Jim, did you find the pictures?
I do not find that email, so you're gonna have to resend it to me if you'd like me to show it.
Okay, well, no, let's just move on to the questions. Do you have any, if any questions come in, you can ask Jay?
Let's go ahead. The only thing I've got in the chat is actually something I put in as an example, so I'll go ahead and ask that. Then I'm going to go ahead and put us back on gallery view for people to raise their hands and ask questions. If you turn off if you make your audio available, and if you raise your hand using the reactions button, you'll pop to the top of the list so that we can see who's ready to ask a question. My question, Jay, was when teaching included both Swahili and French, how are the two languages used in the various classes?
Well, I taught English in English, and I taught music in French.
Okay. And Swahili?
All the main courses of the school were in French.
All right, very good. Okay, Ted Spaeth, I see you have your hand up. Would you go ahead and unmute and ask a question, please?
Yes, Jay, first of all, I am awestruck by your wonderful life history. I commend you from the bottom of my heart. And I am a retired social worker. And one of the things that I'd like to ask you about is something I struggled with for 45 years off and on. And that is, how do you keep the faith? How do you stay motivated in the face of so much suffering? How do you take care of your own mental health? I had a period when I went through a lot of anxiety and depression and other behavior that wasn't quite so healthy. And I've forgiven myself for that because I know how hard it was to do what I was doing. But how did you keep the faith in the midst of all that suffering?
My secret is that I look in the short term and not the long term. Whenever I would think of the long term or the bigger picture, that would be very depressing and it detract from my ability to do what I had to do. I thought in terms of day to day, what I had to do tomorrow. These people would eat tomorrow, and that would be an accomplishment. And there would be one more day for them. Little projects like that, even the handicapped, disabled. I mean, it's in a country that's in a full-blown war, but they still need their chance, and you could get it to them. Just looking at the small things and not worrying too much about the big picture is what I did.
Mm-hmm. A follow-up question then. If you're introspective, if I can ask you to be introspective for a moment, was there an underlying spiritual faith of some form, or even political or philosophical commitment of some form that helped give you the spiritual energy to carry on?
No, it wasn't. There wasn't really.
Okay.
Just
I could never have done without it.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions coming in on the chat, and Tom Brennick, you had your hand up, I know, as well. So let me ask a chat question, and we'll go to Tom. Stephen Keith asked, how much of the continuing strife in countries on the African continent caused by colonization by European countries and drawing of arbitrary borders? So I guess he means how much of it was caused by those things.
I would say that not too much as you might think. Yes, it's the lines that were drawn cut across ethnic groups and were poorly reflective of the demographic composition of the populations. What we face now is interethnic conflict, and that wasn't done in the 1889 split up of the countries. There is some, obviously, as I've said, there's been attacks by Rwanda and Uganda on Congo, and it's pretty clear that they would like some Congo territory to be annexed to them. But I don't know that can be considered a major factor in the violence. I think the race for resources is much more appropriate.
Okay.
Thanks for that, Jay. It's a good perspective. It's good to have that perspective.
Very good. Ted Wright sends a nice message, Jay. Several points of contact between your career experiences and mine. Looking forward to a reunion. Ted, anything more to offer while you're there? You'll have to unmute.
No, we can wait. This is about Jay and his experience. Let's keep it there.
Great. Thank you very much. Don Waller has his hand up for a question. Go ahead, Don.
Yeah, that was an exceptional odyssey you've been through, Jay, and I really admire what you've been up to. In my own travels and work in Central Africa, I was also asked, where is America? Where is the US? China, as you know, is working extensively throughout the region. You've probably read China's Second Continent. But I'm wondering in particular, if you see ways in which the US could be better supporting universities and education in that part of the world.
The United States definitely could be more supportive, but the context has to be right. If you got a war in the country, then you're not going to do some of those kinds of projects. And also, the war is going to eat up a lot of your resources.
Absolutely true. There's a kind of a base datum of normalcy we need before we can, I suppose, move on to and get food is another great form of insecurity in that part of the world. I was surprised to see not even the use of draft animals in Kivu province.
No, but back when I was a Peace Corps volunteer in the Mobutu days, there was a consulate in Bukavu, another consulate in Lubumbashi, and one in Kisangani, I think, where there were cultural centers where the kids could come in and read through American books and get American influence. But those, in the current context, are impossible with the shifting allegiance of the people in those particular places.
Thank you very much. I wish you could have been with me at lunch today with my Congolese, Saliko Songolo, chairman of African Languages and Literature here. You would have had a lot to talk about with regard to music, which he's an authority on as well, as you might expect. Anyway, it's a good reunion.
Steve Klugman, you're next, then Tom Brennicky, and then Carl Nelson. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. This has to do a little bit with the future of Congo, and maybe hard to generalize, but you made a reference to the school where you were assigned to in the Peace Corps as the cream of the crop. And I'm wondering, the kids that come through school, that get to school and through school and really distinguish themselves as people of talent in the Congo, do they tend to stay there? And if so, can they do things that are productive and useful for the country? Or if they have the opportunity, they tend to say, I prefer to live in some place where I don't have to worry as much about getting shot every day, and my future might be a lot brighter, whether it's in academia or business or law or medicine or whatever.
A lot of them would obviously prefer to have jobs in the developed world. I mean, that's always in the back of their minds as something that they would like to do if the opportunity presents itself. But they do find places to work in the industries, like the technological aspects of things, and the cell phone companies, for one. So they do find jobs or in government. So it's a split answer, I guess. I mean, you don't find many of them in the war zones, obviously.
Okay, Tom Brennicky, please. You have to unmute.
Yeah. Jay, blessings to you on what you've accomplished in your life. What would you comment on, having been the energy and the inspiration for this, for Stand Proud? Would you comment on this transition to create an infrastructure and that could drive this forward? That's got to be quite a challenge, a whole different set of skills.
You asking how we built it?
And that you've stepped back, I take it that you've stepped back from it, and that there are others who are carrying on for you.
That's correct. First of all of our people are disabled, so it's a kind of a special crowd. They are getting a lot of training in finances, and as a result of this program.
Jay, am I not correct in saying that a moderate number of them, or of your staff, are from beneficiaries who are up and walking around and have been educated and are working for you full time?
Yes, that's true. All of the staff in all of the brace shops are former beneficiaries. And in some cases, they've been to school and come back to help. Others help all the way through school, do it while they're students. We have a 15-year-old cook who is both a student and a cook. Yeah, so the problem, of course, is finding a job after they get out of the system, after they get through 12th grade. Some of them have been successful. Some of them are petty traders. A few of them are lawyers. A couple of them are doctors. But the rest I don't really know about. They don't come back very often.
Okay, Carl Nelson, please.
Jay, thanks very much for sharing with us today. First of all, my question is, I'm wondering, are you sharing your story with other groups, perhaps groups of young graduates like we all were 50 years ago? I'm sure there are a lot of folks that would benefit from your perspective and from your guidance.
Well, I haven't started yet. I have a meeting with high school students later this month with my high school, where I plan to lay out some of the possibilities and encourage them to get international experience. Above all, to get some advantage, some international experience on them. Otherwise, no, I don't. I haven't tried to spread spread the system, so to speak.
Well, Jay, a suggestion. I work with the Kiwanis clubs here in California. We are focused on helping communities and kids. You might check and see if there's some local Kiwanis clubs in your area, because they might be a good contact for putting you in front of the audiences that would be receptive and willing to help and engage in different kinds of activities.
Thank you. That's a good tip.
And Jay, I'll just say that if you, there's a big, interesting book in there someplace, and if you ever have the energy to do that, I'm sure it'd make for interesting and inspiring reading.
All right. I see one more hand up from Steve Dibble. Steve, would you like to unmute and ask your question? Steve Dibble, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you. Go ahead.
Jay, I just wanted to say hi. You all may know Jay and I went to high school together and graduated in the same class and came to Amherst together. And Jay, I think you know I contributed to you guys for a while. I'm sorry I fizzled out. I don't know what happened, but I'd be happy to get put back on your mailing list. But I just wanted to say it's great to see you again. And I guess I haven't seen you since our 2009 high school reunion. And I'm just wondering are you back in Cincinnati now?
No, I'm in Florida.
Florida? And
Yeah.
is your sister still in Cincinnati?
Yes, my sister's still in Cincinnati.
But your parents, they had moved to New Hampshire, hadn't they? I think
Yeah,
I heard.
they both passed.
Right. Okay, mine too. Well, it's great to see you. I'll let you go. Thank you for all you've done. It's pretty amazing.
Where are you located?
I'm in Tucson, Arizona at this point. I came out here for kind of on a whim and have stayed here for 8 years. Not sure what the future holds for me, but both of my kids have just had their first children. So I may try to zoom back towards the Midwest. Love to run into you again sometime.
Yeah, let's exchange emails.
Steve, we look forward to seeing you at the reunion as well. So thank you very much for joining us. All right, I'm going to stop the recording at this point. So the interview is officially over as to what we'll tape. I'm going to leave the Zoom room open for those of you that would like to stay on and visit for a little while with each other. And again, thank you, David, and thank you, Jay, for a very interesting interview. We appreciate your time this afternoon.
Yes, and thank you, Jay. I really appreciate your willingness to talk and share your life.
Thank you both, and thanks to you too, Jim, for the technical expertise, which is a rare commodity.